Is buy-to-let going to make a comeback? Well, for some people, it's never gone away. Because if you have inherited money or you've got a large cash wad, as it were, because you've made it in a different business and you want to invest safely and you're not getting a very good return on your money in the bank, then you might consider that property is still a very good investment long term. You may not be that worried about the yield you get. That's the amount of rent you receive compared to what you pay for the property. And there are people like that about who have inherited money and so on, and sometimes they want to put the properties in their children's name. These are very, very fortunate children, obviously, but it does happen. So that's one part of the buy-to-let market that has not gone away at all. However, for the rest of us, and I include myself in that because I've got a large portfolio across the UK, the returns on the buy-to-let side of things have been pretty rubbish. Now, I always say if you're going to buy a property or properties to invest into and you want a better yield, you're far better to buy a block of 4 flats, sell 1 or 2 of those flats off and refinance the other 2. That way you get a much better return on your money because you're making profit out of the 2 you're selling, reducing your borrowings, therefore your return on your capital is that much better. So that's one thing I would say, and that's still been a good strategy, as it were, and something I do all the time. So that's important to make that known. Now, for the rest of the people watching this show, the ones who are buying one-off properties, so they're buying a semi. In the old days, you'd buy a semi, you'd be paying 2% interest probably on the money. Wasn't that wonderful those days? 2% interest, property prices went up 10 or 15% a year. If you bought it cheaper because it had to be refurbished, you could refurbish it, refinance it straight away, get some of your cash out and go and buy another one. If it was in good condition, you could hold it 2 or 3 years. It went up in value and you'd sell it or you'd refinance it and go and buy another one, another one, another one. And some people have done this hugely successfully and they've got 20, 30, 40, 50 and more properties. However, that game stopped a few years ago when interest rates started going up and no longer makes it worthwhile. Now, the question is this: is the market on the turn for that type of investment? Interest rates are coming down. I don't think they're going to come down a lot more this year, unfortunately. Maybe 1 more 0.25%, which is pathetic. The Bank of England need a kick up the arse, in my opinion. They're just not positive enough. If you look at most of the European banks and so on, they've already brought the interest rates down more than we have. We're too cautious. We're run by accountants probably. With no balls is the truth. But however, it might come down a little bit more. And next year, they're estimating it might come down to the base rate of 3.5%. Now, at that level, you're getting a return on your money. So most of these rents are creating a yield of 6.5%, which isn't very sexy when you consider that by the time you've paid your insurance, maintenance, and all the rest of it, there's very little return. There's very little profit each month, and in some cases you're in a deficit or have been in a deficit because interest rates have gone up. Now, I think it's on the turn. Whether it's on the turn enough for most people, I'm not sure. At the moment, probably not, but it's definitely on the turn. And when you consider there's a glut of property on the market, there's more properties on the market now than at any time since 2012, 13% more than this time last year. There are bargains about to be found. There are bargains about, but you've got to be able to find them. Auctions is always a great way. And my auction book, I hope, can help you very much on that side of things. So there are bargains to be had. So if you anticipate what's going to happen to the market going forward, then perhaps getting back into buy-to-let now is probably a good move. Also, consider that we've had 10 million more people coming to the UK since 2010, and they estimate by 2034 another 3.4 million people will be living in the UK. Massive housing shortage. Of course, the shortage is more in the south than the north, and traditionally properties in the south are more expensive than the north, and you get a worse yield. So the yield in down south might be 5-6% yield you can live with, maybe. Up north it could be 8 to 10% if you're lucky, but you may not get the capital growth up north than you get down south. However, things are changing. Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, these areas are returning a good yield now, as well as capital growth. There's some lovely flats in Manchester and Birmingham, in near the river, and so on, which are very, very attractive. And actually, they're showing a better return, far better return than properties in London. Far better return. But in London, everyone expects the market to go up, but it hasn't done the last few years, whereas in Birmingham, Manchester, and so on, it has. So long-term property is always a long-term game. Remember that. People want a quick return, in and out. That's hard to do. That is hard to do. But if you're looking for the long term and you anticipate what's going to happen in the future, which is what property investing is all about, by the way, then maybe it's the time to get back in to buy to let. See you next time.